Good evening and welcome to the first of two Inside Government shows for the spring 2021 semester here at Cayuga Community College. This is a show that is brought to you by the college and put on Spectrum, Verizon, Fios, as well as the Regional Media Access, better known as ARMA, and Win 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have in the studio the new New York State Senator, John Mannion, who won his seat back in November and was sworn in just a little bit ahead of the curve of his fellow elected officials in January. He was running in the 50th Senate District against Angie Renna. It did go to absentees. This was a race that had been watched heavily by the state. This is the second run that Mr. Mannion had made for this race. He was supposed to be in a special election last spring, and then something called COVID-19 appeared, and that threw that race off into a general election in November. And then he is here in the studio to talk to us about his election, but more importantly, what he's doing as a new state senator. He was a science teacher with the West Genesee School District. We'll talk about what he's still doing in that realm, as well as the leader of his local teachers union. The district of the 50th includes parts of the city of Auburn, north of Cayuga County, then all the way over to Syracuse and parts in between. We want to thank him for making the time to come in because you're in the start of a new session.
I am. Thank you, Guy, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to visit with you. And we have started session. It's certainly busy and exciting, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Well, welcome, and again, congratulations. And we're delighted that you brought your driver, who doubles as your wife, here to do this, to keep you in line. So, and as we said, she might have slipped us some questions for you. But
okay, great. Yes, right. Well.
So how's the transition going? How are you going from a school teacher to a New York State Senator?
It's been going great. I mean, I do think being a school teacher for so long and also being a leader of teachers contributed to some development of skills that will make me, and hopefully has already made me, a pretty good legislator.
So we should say you did not teach elementary school.
No, I'm a secondary AP biology teacher and chemistry teacher.
Running a kindergarten.
I see where you're going with this, Guy. Yeah, but you know, there's certainly people management is important, and relationship building is important. So I think it was helpful.
So have you taken a leave of absence from teaching, or did you retire, or what are you doing?
So I'm not old enough to retire, and I don't have enough years. I did resign, and there was a provision in the contract that would have allowed me to take a 1-year leave of absence. But of course, these are 2-year terms, and you know, to try to be helpful to my former employer, the district, they want to hire the best person in that position, and if it's a clean cut, it was easier for them. I certainly miss working with my colleagues, and I definitely miss working with my students, but one blessing in running for office and now serving is that I've reconnected with a lot of those former students, and many of them are active and advocating for certain issues, some of them science-related and some of them local, so it's exciting.
So have you been able to set up your office and hire staff? Where are you on that? Because there's a lot that goes into from a November win to starting up.
There is a lot to go into this, for sure, and you know, I was filling an office that did not have a current state senator, although there was staff there to be helpful. So there's an office in Albany, and there's an office locally, and we hope to also open up a satellite office once the COVID situation fades away, we hope, out here in Auburn. So, but there's a lot to it. I was fortunate enough in one way that the seat was vacant, so I could sign my oath a little bit early, and that gave us a couple weeks of a head start, and it's a busy life. You immediately jump into session. We're immediately into the legislative session.
So are you going to Albany every week, or when there are sessions? I know this is an example. This is a break, maybe a break week. Right. But do you go in, or are you doing it by Zoom? Because
yeah, sorry to interrupt. You can do it by Zoom. I have been going every week. So if you are to speak to a bill, let's say, that has to be in person. So I know that being a new state senator, it's important for me to be there. I certainly see that it's helpful, and I completely dedicate myself and focus on those legislative sessions. So they have been ongoing, you know, and I've been in Albany to participate in those, and it's been a good process.
So just for contextual reasons, you've alluded to it, I didn't get into the facts, but you ran 2 years ago against Bob Antonacci. it was a very close race back then.
Right.
He only served a year, ran for the state Supreme Court, and then the seat was vacant for a while.
That's correct, yes.
And so, so what's been your biggest surprise as a new senator so far?
Somebody asked me just the other day about this, and I think the biggest surprise is the rapid pace at which things occur. So there's multiple committees, and I'm happy that I'm serving on several of those. But some bills get in the pipeline. They go to committee, and then after they are publicly announced, they can very quickly go to the floor. So it is I think the number of pieces of legislation and the speed at which they move while we're in a budget session is something that I quickly became adaptable to because I had to.
So speaking of committees, you are the chair of the Disabilities Committee, correct?
That is correct, yes.
Is it odd for a freshman so early to become a chair of a committee?
It's not. It's not. They're, in this particular situation, everyone that's in the majority has a chair seat. So this actually was two committees called Mental Hygiene.
So are there 43 committees?
There are, yeah.
Okay.
That's correct.
That
yes.
might be a problem in itself.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So it is mental health and
developmental disabilities. So that committee has been split, and really, it's amazing because advocates for those two overlapping circles have come to me and said that they're so happy that they have their standalone committee when it comes to individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities.
Does vested and everything fall under your, or the old vested setup fall under your?
Yeah.
So if I looked at your committee list, it looks like there's 5 Democrats, 2 Republicans. Is that the normal split?
That's how the numbers lie in this legislative session. So there is, to make sure that there's representation on each committee. That's how at least some of the committees are broken out.
And what has your committee been working on right now?
Well, we have a few different bills that we're working on. One of them is for residential facilities as it relates to people who are living in residences. Those institutions, the bill states that they cannot close for a period of 1 year rather than 90 days. And I have support from all members of the committee on that. We think that it's greatly disruptive to this population to have potentially such a quick turnaround, and then of course the staff as well. I think we've seen similar situations outside of that committee. Another one is an Ombudsman's bill that basically helps a family shepherd through the process when it comes to placing someone in a residential facility or getting them the services that they need. Along those lines, there's also advocacy that's outside of legislation. So I feel very strongly, and I'm proud of the fact that I was a strong advocate to make sure that not just individuals with disabilities were prioritized in the vaccination process, not just in residential facilities, but also those outside of them. And we pushed hard for that, and we did end up getting that change because, this is a population that navigating through those websites could be a challenge, and also just getting to the vaccination site can be a challenge. And the data shows that people with developmental disabilities are in that vulnerable category. So advocacy happened in that area, and I'm happy and proud that we got a change.
So 43 committees. 43 committees. You serve on a number: civil service, I think, education, which kind of makes sense since you were a teacher.
That's correct.
In the case of this committee, do you have a special interest in this particular area?
I do. Like most families, I have family members that fall into this category, and I've seen from a workplace standpoint, but also from an early intervention standpoint, exactly what is necessary for this population and the good that can come from getting it right for them.
So you mentioned 43. There's 43 Democrats, 20 Republicans. Besides you and Rachel May, who many people in this area know, are there other upstate in this general region Democrats? Or let's put it this way: north of New York City, how large is the percentage of the 43?
Sure. So If we can just move along the thruway, and we'll start at Buffalo. So we have two senators from Buffalo, Tim Kennedy and Sean Ryan. Sean is coming from the Assembly. He's a new senator. And then in Rochester, we have Samar Baruch and Jeremy Cooney. Syracuse, as you stated, Rachel May and myself. And then in the Albany area, Neil Breslin has been there for some time, and also Michelle Hinchy.
So about 6 of the.
Well, there's 8 there. 8.
I'm
yes,
sorry, 8.
Yeah, Buffalo, Rochester, Albany, and Syracuse all have 2. And then as you start to go down to the Hudson Valley, there are others, of course, north of the city.
The governor released his budget about a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
What do you like in it?
Well, there's some things that are a little bit surprising that are in there, like money for housing, and some programs have not been cut. But in the area one area that I represent, which would be developmental disabilities, there have been at least numbers that are flat or lower, and I will strongly advocate that some of those dollars could be restored. You've already mentioned, I come from the world of public education, so that's important to me. The federal, I'm going down the parts that are the good and the bad, I guess. And, we hope those federal dollars come, of course, they're necessary, but we don't want them to supplant the state dollars because going forward, when we get into 2022, 2023,
those won't be there.
Those funds won't be there. So we have to make sure that we fund those areas. So, there's going to be a lot of advocacy when it comes to the budget.
I want to come back to education in a second, but just some general thematic issues. Governor Cuomo and his predecessor, David Patterson, tended to put a lot of policy in budgets. Is there a lot in this one, or is it pretty close to just being budgetary?
It's big. There's a lot of it, and I think like most people, whether you're in government or outside of government, we would rather not have it that way because it would, people talk about a clean budget, and I'm supportive of that. I hope that
this gives the governor enormous leverage in his process.
We're not going to disagree on that. We're not going to disagree, and there's of course negotiations that occur, but things get jammed into the budget, and that is, again, there's some items in there, but we're still going through it. It's still fairly new. We're getting briefed and presentations, and my staff are pouring through it.
So you and I did a Wednesday morning roundtable interview maybe 2 months ago, and we were talking about the gap back in April of last year was $12 to $14 billion. At this particular stage, do you know what the gap is between, separate from what the governor's talking about? We'll talk about the Biden administration in a moment.
Sure.
But what do you see as the gap right now?
Right. So from the governor's office, we're looking at about a $14 billion shortfall. Yes. There are some improvements. There's some revenue numbers out there that are encouraging, but they're certainly not encouraging to the point where they're going to close that gap. I think there's some differing on how long-term and how many multi-years down the road we're looking at the potential for a budget gap and how big that gap is. But that's where we stand right now.
And so as I understand it, the money that the Biden administration is trying to pass by March is not included in these budget numbers. Am I correct on that?
He had a couple different proposals out there, and one of those proposals that we're kind of basing things off of would be if $6 billion come from the federal government.
Is that the number you think?
I don't, I'd rather not even speculate. I'm hopeful. I do believe that our federal representatives are going to be strong advocates for New York. I think it's well documented that we're kind of passed over in many of the other stimulus bills, so I'm hopeful.
And the budget is due in about 40 days?
Yes, we've got to get it done by March 31st. That's correct.
Do you think it will be on time?
Somebody had mentioned that they think that it may not be, but I do believe that we're going to. I think there's so much variability out there for organizations, municipalities that have to plan because of some of those holdbacks that we had heard about when it came to the distribution of dollars. So we can't put them in that position. And
so we should explain that.
Yeah.
So in some cases, a municipality might have thought they would have gotten a fourth quarter payment whenever that calendar piece was. Right. And instead of cutting back in the summer of last year, the governor retained the money.
Right.
Which means it's still there, we assume, and then there is a plan to distribute that. In many cases, many of those municipalities have told if the budget passes and what goes on, that'll be distributed.
Right.
A number of them want that money sooner than later.
Of course they do, yes, and we're advocating for that, and we're going to continue to.
So 10 years ago, on time was the mantra.
Mm-hmm.
Is on time or right more important to you?
That's a great question. Obviously, we want to get it right. I think it was important to put in those constraints, for lack of a better word, that we get it on time because it was a problem. We can't be trying to. Yeah, August was the month that was going to come out of my. We can't do that. We can't do that. So we have to get it right. There is a lot going on. Negotiations. If leadership is currently negotiating, we've got to put out our bill out there, and then negotiation starts. But we certainly have negotiation and prioritizing within our conference right now.
I want to talk about schools. You mentioned that. So one of the big issues locally for at least one school district in your district, Auburn, but it also impacts Moravia and Union Springs, they are all seeing a cut. We'll talk about Auburn specifically in a moment. Mm-hmm. But explain to me the logic here that the education budget is going up, if I looked at the numbers, about $2 billion. So I'm trying to figure out, how did the cut come about?
You use the word logic.
Okay.
This is where we need to negotiate. So the formula, you and I would agree, you understand this, the formula is flawed, and sometimes it punishes the losers. And we've got to get that is something I'm committed to. Not knowing how long I'm going to be in the state legislature, I know this, that getting that formula either fixed.
So this is specific largely to Auburn as well.
Oh, I know. I'm going back to Auburn. When I saw it broken out and I saw some numbers in the red and I saw the districts that were impacted, it's because logic is not being applied. It's not. We have an antiquated formula that is flawed, and we got to get rid of it. We can't seem to break away from that. Whether you're going to ask a question about Auburn or not, I have to talk about it, which is Auburn is in a small bucket of schools that the numbers are just wrong. They're hurting that school district. I'm on the education committee. I have a great relationship with the chair, Shelley Mayers. She's fantastic, and she and I had I'm going to advocate for public schools in my district and public schools in general 100%. But Auburn is different. Auburn is different. They're getting stung. They're getting hurt. They're getting hurt year after year. And the kids in Auburn.
We're talking about millions of dollars. We're not talking about.
Absolutely. And the kids in Auburn are just as important as the kids everywhere else in the state.
So do you think your role as an educator and also being on the education committee and being in the majority, which
it certainly
helps. That could be the trifecta.
That's right.
Do you think that may get the change this year?
As far as changing the formula, I don't believe so, and that speaks
it will take time.
I'm being honest. It's going to take time. I think that the Senate was working in the correct direction because I know that they were either holding hearings or a task force was traveling around the state. I was there when many students from Auburn and either spoke, but certainly attended, and we've got to get that right. You talk about 40 days. That formula is not going to change in 40 days, but I will advocate to help with supportive dollars because I think that the lack of logic and the problem is obvious.
I want to get into COVID, but I want two more quick education questions. One is the issue of opening schools for 5 days a week.
Yeah.
How big and I know your wife is a second grade teacher, if I remember correctly?
That's correct, yes.
How big is the issue of opening 5 days a week to you?
Yes, she also is, supports as far as an intervention or an instructional specialist with math and reading. This year is a unique year. So
for everybody.
It is, absolutely. So, some districts I think can pull it off and some districts can't. Some of that has to do with staffing and funding and facilities. At West Genesee, before I left, K through 4 was in person 5 days a week. And I'm the first one to say that there's no substitute for in-person learning, but also we want to be safe, and if regulations are going to change, that's...
So Jeff Parazola, when he was here, said that the two items that were important for Auburn to make that determination is moving from 6 feet to 3 feet, and also dealing with the number of students you can bus. That is a governor's decision. Am I correct?
Well, I think I know from paying attention to the county that I live in, which is Onondaga County, that those conversations were occurring at the county level, talking about the 3-foot, separation.
Did you get your COVID shot?
I have not.
You have not?
If I was a teacher, I'd already have it.
Gotcha. I want to talk about the state's response, but this bigger issue has come up, especially in the last 24 hours with the FBI.
Yeah.
So right now, the biggest controversy about COVID in New York, maybe not in the nation,
Sure.
is whether the Cuomo administration correctly reported nursing home deaths last year. The Attorney General came out with a report maybe about 3 weeks ago. Do you think they were correctly reported or not?
Well,
from what you've read or what you've been told?
Well, because the media was out there and people who work in these facilities were out there going, it doesn't seem like these numbers are accurate, then I would agree with that. I believe that there was not full disclosure. Yes, the number of deaths that had occurred were fully disclosed, but some of those deaths were occurring in hospitals and they weren't being counted. Not all states were counting them the same way.
So there was a call on February 10th, about 8 days ago, with Senate leaders, Senate Democratic leaders, we should clarify that, where an administration official tended to agree with what had been reported out there. I don't want to get into specifics. Right. Were you on that call?
I was not.
Okay.
No.
So now we have this question about the FBI being involved. Your conference met last Friday, I believe, on
that's correct.
This subject. Not that the FBI was involved,
no,
to the best of my knowledge at that time.
Yes.
What do you know so far, what you've been told as a member of the conference and as the Senate, of where this is in the process right now?
So I, of course, I just as a layperson know about the Attorney General's report, and then you also have the FBI and one of the lower state attorneys in New York investigating. Other than that, I am not going to be briefed on where the FBI is in their process or anywhere else. So, what I do know is that members who are leaders of the committee or leaders of the conference are continuing to advocate to make sure that the full story is being disclosed.
So with what you know, and whether you use the old Will Rogers theory, all I know is what I read in the newspapers theory, do you think there was malfeasance?
I know that Rachel May is
she was on the conference
more privy to those conversations because she was, the head of the aging committee, and she was in that meeting. So what she says, and I do have a great relationship with her and trust her as far as not to play politics, is she's saying that the information should have come quicker. And when I hear her say that, what I think she's saying is a full disclosure of that. So I think she doesn't believe that it's done with bad intentions.
So on the other hand, your Republican colleagues came out with a press release this morning, roughly the same time your staff was confirming you were coming here.
Okay, yeah.
Saying that they in essence alleged there was a cover-up. Do you think we're at that stage yet?
I think it's important. I think the families of the people who have lost someone in nursing homes need to know, and I do believe that the investigations are going to progress, and I support that.
So when you sat here back in October, we talked a little bit about the governor's emergency powers.
Right.
And I think, if I remember correctly, you thought at that time that they should be brought back, and this was before the Thanksgiving and Christmas surge. Do you still think that those emergency powers need to be reviewed and either rethought or removed at this stage?
Right. So back then, listen, I was saying and will continue to say that when we're in the midst of the pandemic, what we needed was swift, decisive actions. Now we're about 11 months into this crisis, and we know a lot more about it. Things have changed, and I do know that I think there's great consensus out there from the constituents of New York, and then also within the Senate and the Assembly, that it's time to scale back at least some of that.
So has this nursing home issue supercharged this discussion?
I think the conversation was always ongoing.
So this was a discussion last Friday anyway. From news reports, it sounds. I know you don't want to give me the secrets of the temple.
Sure,
but,
that's right.
But at the same time,
yes.
it has been reported that that was a topic, was the issue of dealing with emergency powers
Sure.
and remove, at least modifying them.
So we have a role to play. We're a co-equal branch of government, right? So from day one, when I became a part of that conference, even before I signed an oath of office as a senator, there was conversations about the executive orders and the powers.
You're 45 days into the session, not that you've met 45 days. Why is it taking so long to look at this issue?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think that people saw the necessity of making those quick, decisive actions, and by people, I do mean elected officials. And people are already talking about, what if something has to occur? Do we have the ability to act that quickly? But again, I think, as you've noted, and certainly it's well documented in the media at this point, that things have accelerated.
So I want to play the devil's advocate on that particular last point before one last final question that came up from a guest here, is the governor received a lot of praise, other than the nursing homes, for his response in large part.
Right.
You did. Other people have said that on both parties.
Yes.
What happens if you take the powers away and there's another spike? So we have the South African, we have the UK strains.
Sure.
Is the worry that there's so much desire because of the nursing home issue to restrain the point person? Who fills that void?
Yeah, well, the governor still can act, and we've been briefed about what it means to suspend certain laws and versus give certain directives, and different states do things differently. So if we are back to a very critical point, and we need to be supportive of and pass over those executive powers if they are pulled back, to go back in the other direction.
But you do think there will be a modification?
That can be done. I think as the leader of the Senate, who I have great respect for, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, has come out openly to say it looks as though there's going to be a move, and I'll just leave it right there.
Last question, because somebody who sat in that seat last Thursday was Chris Nucerino, the head of the YMCA, and I believe he was on a conference call with you earlier that day about camps.
Yes.
And last year it was decided very late in I believe June, to allow camps to go to day camps.
Right.
That's bread and butter for Y camps, for Boy Scout camps, Girl Scout camps. He's asking you and others to lobby the governor to make a decision sooner than later. Where does that stand?
Well, listen, I have concerns that we're going to lose some of these camps. I mean, we're going to lose them forever. And some of them are just pillars of our communities and certainly very important to families. What I saw when I was in a classroom was absolutely that I don't think you're going to find a more compliant population than these kids. The camps are going to know what they have to do. It's not like, we had this crisis, it was a few months and a decision had to be made. We understand the value of testing ahead of time, of disclosure, of a whole number of things, making sure that the staff is vaccinated prior to the start of these, and also social distancing, So I think you hear where I'm coming from a parent of someone who worked at summer camps, who all three kids have gone to summer camp and seen the value of that. I think and I hope, like with other changes that we've made, that with safe protocols and supportive parents and understanding staff and strong leadership, that it can be done.
Well, Senator, thanks for your first interview with us as a senator. You've been here before for forums.
Sure.
We thank you for being here. The door is always open, and we'd love to have you back to give us from time to time Albany updates about what you're doing for the 50th District.
Great. It was great to be here. Thanks again, Guy. I appreciate it.
Our guest has been Senator John Mannion, who represents the 50th Senate District. Cuyahoga County currently has 3 senators. We'll see what redistricting brings in another 2 years or a year from now. We'll be back in just a moment with Cuyahoga County Public Health Director Kathleen Cuddy to give us a COVID-19 update, as well as talk about where they are on testing and vaccines. We will be back next Tuesday with Cuyahoga County Legislative Chairwoman Aileen McNabb Coleman, who will give us a legislative update, also about her new role, is the upgraded role, I should say, at the legislature. And in 2 weeks, we hope to bring you the mayor, sans a snowstorm. As we have said in the past, He has been wiped off our schedule twice because of snowstorms, and he hopes to be here in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from today, in fact, or 2 weeks from now. We'll also have in the coming weeks, Assemblyman John Lamodis will be here, City Manager Jeff Dygert, Port Byron Superintendent of Schools Neil O'Brien, the Dean of the Cuyahoga County Superintendents, who's about to retire, as well as Auburn Superintendent of Schools Jeff Perazzola will be back, and Police Chief Sean Butler, who is also retiring this year, as well as East Hill Medical's Executive Director Keith Cutler. That agency was founded 50 years ago here in Cuyahoga County. We hope to bring you also shows on domestic violence incidents, as well as spikes in opioid overdoses. These are not necessarily related issues, but we want to talk about those as well. And we'll finish it off the semester with a Zoom forum with the candidates for the Auburn Large School District in April. I'll moderate those forums as usual, and the Citizen's Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of the Citizen, will do the questioning. Before we go, though, we would like to let you know that you can send us your ideas for guests or questions to cozguytho@aol.com or Inside Government, 141 Dunning Avenue, Auburn, New York, 13021. Again, I'm Guy Cosentino for Cuyahoga Community College. We want to thank you for watching. Stick around for Kathleen Cuddy. She's got some important information for you. But otherwise, good night, have a great tomorrow, and be safe.